The Utah State Bolt Action Championship is upon us, and to us wargamers here in Salt Lake City, it is many things. It's our final event and send-off for Bolt Action version 2. It's the first 2-day, 5-game Bolt Action tournament in our state of Utah, and as it is a competitive event, it will be the death of flavorful thematic army lists. Well, maybe not that last part. Turns out you can have your cake and eat it too when it comes to running a tooled up, flavorful Bolt Action army. Let's take a look at my selections and predict whether or not my list has what it takes to restore Utah's honor. The Utah State Bolt Action Championship, which is just one of many wargaming events at this year's Salt Lake Open Convention, is a 1,250 point single generic platoon event. Similar to the event run at the Las Vegas Open, there is an order dice limit, but where the one at LVO was a measly 14 order dice, the SLO event allows you 16. While this is a bit restrictive, I found that it does give you some extra points to put into some units and upgrades you wouldn't normally splurge on. I don't get to play in many Bolt Action events, certainly not 5-game ones, so I really wanted to make this one count. I debated bringing Japanese for a while, but then settled on my Romanians once again, as the strongest list I could make would no doubt be Romanian, with all its extra selectors and firepower. However, I had already taken my Romanians to LVO, and I had another army available to me, one that I had poured years of work into. Surely it deserved to see 5 games at an event, right? As I looked into my options for a Pacific Theater themed US Army, I knew in my soul that it was the right choice for this event. I had built my US Army around the invasion of New Georgia, a battle that is not well known, but has a ton of characteristics I find really interesting. And while this force was built to that theme, competitive players will know that the US Army is no slouch when it comes to competitive prowess. While I made some additions to the list that would tool up the army considerably, everything still fits into the US Army in the Pacific theme. So, let's go over the list, and as we go I will discuss my choices and any interesting hobby tidbits associated with my selections. The original army had a sub-theme of every model a conversion, and this reigns true for all the new units I've added for this event as well. The list is 1,250 points on the nose, and at 15 order dice, it is just 1 dice under the limit. For my HQ, I have taken an inexperienced second lieutenant with a buddy. Honestly, he's really just here to look cool. The infantry selections begin with an 8-man late war infantry squad at regular with 2 BARs. This is very standard for US lists. Next up I have a 7-man late war marine squad. Originally these were another 8-man regular army section wearing HBT camo as seen on New Georgia. But I decided to go to a 7-man veteran squad to increase their chances of survival, and class them instead as Marines so I had access to 3 BARs instead of 2. This squad will be able to put out a ridiculous amount of firepower while also being very durable. There were Marine troops fighting alongside Army GIs on New Georgia, and you may have noticed the 2 Fiji Scouts included in the unit. The Fiji Scouts brought jungle warfare expertise to the American units fighting on New Georgia. These guys are Marine bodies with 3D printed heads and bare feet sourced from Warlord Zulu bodies. Moving on, I am bringing 2 veteran Army infantry squads at 7 men each. Both squads have 2 BARs, and I use some of my extra points to upgrade them to tough fighters. These squads are really versatile in that they can put out plenty of pins, but are also super dangerous up close, especially when fighting over objectives. These squads are denoted by their bayonets and their rippling physiques. My final infantry selection is a 6-man regular engineer squad with flamethrower. This is my wildcard unit, as they can both be a distraction and a hard-hitting unit if the flamethrower rolls well. I purchased them at regular to keep their costs down. Moving on to teams, we start with the inexperienced heavy machine gun. This is an artillery battery 5th section heavy machine gun team from the D-Day US Sectors campaign book, and it's available for generic platoons. So what makes this selection special? It gives me access to a second bazooka slot. While the specific unit is from a D-Day selector, the Army in the Pacific fielded one heavy machine gun per company, so it's not out of theme, it just has that sweet special rule. And as you may have guessed, I am taking 2 regular bazooka teams. Their 24-inch range allows me flexibility in shutting down enemy vehicle movement or double teaming scary armored units. I already had the firing bazooka as part of my initial Army build, so I decided to make the second one at rest, which is loosely inspired by this photo. I have a regular sniper team, mostly to dissuade small teams, especially those pesky British free artillery observers. A regular heavy mortar team with spotter rounds out my team weapons, and with the abundance of points offered by the event format, upgrading the mortar to the 3-inch template was a no-brainer. The mortar round coming out of the barrel is a bazooka round with green stuff, mounted on plastic rod, with cotton glued around it, just like my firing bazooka. It fits nicely into the hollow mortar tube I scratch built about a year ago. In my artillery slot is the tried and true medium howitzer with spotter. I had originally built an AA gun for this army, but could not get a stationary autocannon working well with this list. The howitzer's direct and indirect firing modes are just too flexible to pass up on in a competitive format. The gun itself is a plastic Rubicon kit with crew converted from Warlord US Army, Marine, and Zulu kits. For transports, I have 2 of the famous Dodge trucks. One will carry the engineers, and the other will most likely carry a squad of veterans around the table. I already had one of these trucks for my initial army, but the second one was built with this event in mind. And just like the first, all the passengers are magnetized, so it's easy to remove them to denote that the truck is empty. Finally, we have the piece de resistance, the M3A3 Lee. You may think that the Army never used these in the Pacific, but in fact they did. Once. During the Battle of Macon Island, Lee tanks outfitted with deep wading kits supported the Army infantry in their fight to conquer the tiny island. This is a 3D print with a Trenchworks commander, and to make sure it fit into my every model a conversion sub-theme, I scratch built a deep wading kit using plastic sheet and green stuff. The M3A3 does not have the vulnerable rule, but does have easily catches fire, a 10-point reduction that makes the on-fire damage result possibly more severe, which is well worth the points deduction in my mind. My only real worry about this list is that it is not at the 16 dice limit. I feel like most armies I face will be 16 order dice, because that number is quite easy to hit at 1250 points. However, being 1 order dice down is not really that much of a disadvantage, and the points I spent to upgrade my infantry and keep my Lee from having vulnerable are more of a boon than trying to fit in something cheap like a medic, in my opinion. Fire and maneuver will literally be the name of my game, with my rifles and BARs throwing out pins on the move, while the howitzer and mortar clear off any support elements my opponent might have. With the twin bazookas, I can either keep enemy vehicles from moving where they want to, or have them focus on armor while my Lee deals with infantry with its main gun and 10 machine gun shots. My engineer squad takes one of the trucks as a transport and is almost a wildcard unit, coming in from reserve or outflank to keep my opponent guessing and worrying about that flamethrower. And if my enemy disregards it to focus on something else, like the Lee, it can zoom onto an objective deep in enemy territory. All of the missions for the event are objective missions, so having 3 veteran squads should give me enough staying power to take and hold more than my opponent. For LVO, I made a prediction how I would fare in the event, and for Salt Lake Open, I'd rather set a goal. I came away from LVO with 2 wins, 2 losses, and a draw. This time, I'd like to improve on that result by having 3 wins. I will be recapping the event, either in podcast or video form, so you'll just have to wait until then to find out how things went. Good luck to all the players at the Utah State Bolt Action Championship, and we'll see you next time. My only real